Imagine this, no phones, no electricity, no roof above your head, no fixed house, right? You're living in a cave, you wake up in a cave, you eat what you find in the forest. How do people basically survive even without, agriculture, without farming? In anthropology, we basically call this as environmental adaptation. Your home essentially is something from your environment. We have to check weather on apps or, aaj kya hoga on the internet. They check nature. They know it. They probably know for the entire week. Climate change is something that is happening, right? The temperature is increasing, and we know today that it is not just natural. There is a human-made angle as well, right? Anthropogenic causes भी है. You can ask yourself, अगर हम 2 दिन के लिए यहाँ पे ट्रैक के लिए जा रहे हैं, and if you are not found in the third day, right? On the third day, you probably need to call, SOS or 911 ka equivalent in India. Your entire food system basically depends on nature, on your forest, right? And forest and nature is becoming unpredictable. We panic when our GPS doesn't work, right? अगर हमें कहीं पे जाना है, right? We cannot navigate ourselves. Now, if you're out of data, it's your forest का access का loss. ये actually a silent violence है, right? Some scholars even basically call it as a structural violence against the tribes. All right. Imagine this. No phones, no electricity, no roof above your head, no fixed house, right? You're living in a cave, you wake up in a cave, you eat what you find in the forest, where the cave is, right? You understand time and you have a sense of time, but not by, understanding what's, on the clock, or your watch, but by looking at वो stars and, वो sounds of nature वगैरह, right? अब 1 second के लिए आप सोचो. If somebody is living like this, is this backwardness, right? Or is this a different way of living, right? Because here's a surprising truth. This is not a kind of a life that people lived only in the past. It is happening even right now in India. So the real question is, how can a community, in fact, there's a story of many communities in India, many tribes in India. How can communities and tribes that actually survived like this for thousands of years, and I'll dwell a little more on this, how can they start disappearing in just last few decades, last few generations, right? And more importantly, what does their story or stories of many of these tribes tell us about our idea of development? ठीक है? So आज हम सिर्फ एक tribe की story नहीं देखने वाले हैं, right? We are basically looking at one particular tribe का example, but we are analyzing, many tribes. There are more than 700 and plus tribes in the country. So we are trying to take a look at tribes through the lens of anthropology, which means understanding how tribes, how humans basically live, how they adapt, और कैसे culture और environment ना, it is एक साथ वो evolve होते हैं. Right, so इस वीडियो में, इस लेक्चर में, we'll try to understand a few things clearly. पहला वाला, how do Cholanaikkans, this particular tribe in Kerala, how exactly do they live? What is their daily life like? What is their knowledge? What is their systems, and so on. ठीक है? We'll try to understand कि what are the kind of changes that are actually taking place around them, right? In terms of climate, in terms of forests, in terms of, the flora, fauna, animals, plants, and why are those kind of changes taking place? And तीसरा वाला, in fact, the most important question, कि क्या उनका lifestyle, the way in which they live, is it really underdeveloped? ठीक है? या हमारी understanding of, their ways of life, is that incomplete? And trust me, by the end of this, I'm sure that you will not only learn about one particular tribe, but you will start questioning what we call as development itself. And when I say we, the non-tribals vis-a-vis the tribals. See, if you really enter into their world, you step into their world, look at the kind of world in which they stay, right? You're walking through a place, and this is actually Nilambur forest. Nilambur forest is in Western Ghats in Kerala. It is somewhere in between Palakkad and Malappuram districts, right? And you can see this, you can imagine an early morning here with a lot of mist, right? Wet soil from the fresh rain, maybe in the previous night, a lot of silence. In fact, यहाँ पे there is a national park called as Silent Valley National Park. वहाँ पे वो crickets वगैरह कम होते हैं, ताकि it's not that loud, ठीक है? Very, very kind of quiet. And you can see places like this, you can see waterfalls, you can see maybe a rock shelter, and imagine a rock shelter, okay? That's probably where they have spent the previous night, right? Inside there must be a small fire that is going. They must be, in that fire, they might have kept it for warmth, or they might be, sort of like heating something up. They have a whole bunch of these wild roots, a lot of edible plants in that particular place. No kitchen like us, no fridge like us. ठीक है? No thought of कि आज क्या order करें, kind of thoughts or discussions, right? How do they survive? In fact, how do people basically survive even without, agriculture, without farming? They don't farm at all, right? They are hunters and gatherers, right? They collect, they gather, right? So honey collect karte hain, tubers collect karte hain. Tuber is basically anything that grows underneath. Lots and lots of diversity with regard to the tubers. Fruits ho sakte hain, wild fruits, and mushrooms and many of these kind of things, right? So their entire life, depends on the forest, not just their food. बहुत सारा anthropological literature है. Research essentially shows that their life is deeply tied to their forest, to the forest ka ecology, and not to agriculture like us. So, in fact, you can ask yourself, अगर हम 2 दिन के लिए यहाँ पे ट्रैक के लिए जा रहे हैं, and if you are not found in the 3rd day, right? On the 3rd day, you probably need to call, SOS or 911 का equivalent in India. Isn't that right? But this is their life. ठीक है, this is where they are most comfortable. In fact, why caves? Why caves, right? This is naturally to a lot of people, they have this kind of question, right? Shouldn't modern people be living in built homes? So why caves? Why not build your own sort of homes? That's actually a good question. It's a common question. Okay, they live in these kind of caves or rock shelters. Rock shelters. They call it basically alai is what they call it. Of course, I might be mispronouncing it. But these are not just random caves and rock shelters. Okay, these are like proper places where they have, they use it to protect themselves from the rain, to stay safe from, the animals there. Naturally, बहुत cool भी रहते हैं. Think of this as nature-made 1 BHK, 2 BHK for you. Okay, in fact, some of them, the entry points honge, there'll be like some exit points and so on, right? And you can see, right? So this is their place, right? In anthropology, we basically call this as environmental adaptation. Your home essentially is something from your environment. Okay, so ऐसा नहीं है कि they don't know how to build their homes, or they did not fail at building homes. Okay, they just didn't need to. Now, if you have something like this, imagine this, right? Why would you want to have a small little, place जहाँ पे walking के लिए भी आपको बाहर जाना पड़े? ठीक है, they have amazing places. In fact, another reason why you cannot be building your own sort of homes in these kind of places is that from one day to another day you might even be traveling 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers, right? So wherever they go, right, they have places where they can stay safe, right, and they can rest. Okay. A lot of people also feel that somehow tribes, meaning little underdeveloped, and even if I take in terms of knowledge, in terms of literacy, right, they are relatively low. In fact, Cholanaikkans are, 191 in population, right, around 200 population, and let's say around 20% in literacy, the way we define literacy, right? So you might not think that they are highly literate, but does that mean they are not knowledgeable, right? In fact, it gets so fascinating because they have a lot better knowledge of many things which we are not going to be able to know unless we look it up, or we need Google for it, or we need technology for it. They know exactly when it is going to rain, many hours prior. Okay? Maybe because they listen to the frogs, the kind of sounds that they make, right? They know exactly what time it is. Okay? They know exactly what day it is, not because of their clocks and their watches, their calendars, right? Because of the way they observe the stars. They have much better sort of clarity with regard to. They are experts at detecting animals nearby. Okay? Sound. Unka smell, even the tiniest of forest ka signals, they are very, very alert to it. Anthropological literature basically writes a lot about it. It's highlighting that unka jo sensory awareness jo hai itna high hai in comparison to us, right? We won't even know if animals are behind us, right? They know exactly, peripheral vision, unka ability to smell, bahut sara hai. Ecological intelligence is like amazing. Right? But हम देखते हैं based on our indicators, literacy rate क्या है, can you do 2 + 2 and whatever it is that is required to sort of show literacy, right? We have to check weather on apps, or आज क्या होगा on the internet. They check nature, they know it. ठीक है, they probably know for the entire week, right? We panic when our GPS doesn't work, right? अगर हमें कहीं पे जाना है, right, we cannot navigate ourselves now if you're out of data. ठीक है, they know they can navigate the forest without any kind of maps. They know each and every tree there, every plant there, kaun se hain, kitne varieties are there, right? So to think that somebody is backward and to label them like this is inappropriate, okay? Or it is incomplete sort of understanding, right? Can we say ki who's more advanced right now? Okay, now that I've basically told you all of these things, right? So that is going to be a debate. In fact, if you think, what is their ways of life? In fact, detecting animals, this is like bug marks. Right, you want to understand tigers, tribes are the best persons to do. You want to understand any kind of animal, it'll be the tribes. Okay? In fact, even beyond this, if you want to understand what their life is really like, right? Is it like so difficult in the forest with very little sort of, belongings and so on? Actually, na, it's a very good life, say the tribes. Right? We don't actually want to come to city. Please don't move us outside of this particular forest. ठीक है? हमारा life जो है, it is not, defined by the alarms that we have to set and then snooze every morning. ठीक है? No traffic का noise, no traffic का congestion, no deadlines. ठीक है? Just, birds का sounds, flowing water, waterfalls in your area. ठीक है? मतलब, can we imagine living? Right? With water, flats में रहते हैं, कैसे रहते हैं? Winds through the trees, right? Small family groups, the entire members of the family basically stay together. Most of you basically have to come away from your family, go and stay in a particular place, जहाँ पे आप education के लिए, काम के लिए, right? So we have to basically go. But they have, large places, large forests, and they tend to stay in like small families together, right? So all of those things, really make their life. They walk together, they gather together, they hunt together, right? Got different ways of life it is. Okay? Food wise, every day what you need is basically something that you have to go and fetch it today. That's fun, and that is done collectively. Food is not something that you store. हमारे लिए fridge वगैरह है, but they don't have a fridge. What do? ठीक है, आज जो मिला वो आज खाएंगे. ठीक है? We make merry with whatever we have. Tomorrow we may not have it. ठीक है? And that's fine. Sometimes it's going to be honey, sometimes it's going to be tuber, sometimes it's going to be fruit, sometimes it's going to be. So they have n number of options. ठीक है? And their life is mostly driven by not deadlines and calendar and to-do lists, but mostly by rhythms of nature, by the seasons, by the forest. When it rains, they adapt. When the seasons change, they adjust. ठीक है, कोई rush नहीं है, कोई overload नहीं है. So, the kind of way in which we live and the way we think that our life is a lot better really confuses them, right? Thinking ki you have all of these kind of problems and you want to pull us also into it. You understand now, unke liye it is something that they find it very, very difficult to understand. And like we misunderstand them as well. Okay, but at least they have a point. Okay? We do as well, but you understand. So they have a very balanced, almost zen-like existence in the forests. Okay? Koi excess nahi hai, koi waste nahi hai, koi over-consumption nahi hai. But here's the thing. Their ways of life, agar aap dekhoge, whatever I've just said, okay, it has started changing. It has been changing for the last few generations, at least since the British had come and, they found interest, the timber ka interest in the forests and so on. Right? What are the kind of changes that are taking place? Okay? See, one thing that you have to understand is the pehla thing that has actually changed in their ways of life, that is completely changing their, their everything. Their world is essentially changing because of a few things, right? And you can see them here. One is climate change, the other is forest access nahi mil raha hai, animal conflict, okay, and knowledge ka loss, right? Many things are there. In fact, like we'll take a look at each and every one of these. Pehla wala is going to be climate change, and you guys understand, right? Climate change is something that is happening, right? Temperature is increasing, and we know today that it is not just natural. There is a human-made angle as well, right? Anthropogenic causes bhi hai. Pehle kya tha? In the forest, life is still a little better because there is predictable rainfall, right? Stability, वो seasons का stability होते हैं, right? Forest का जो cycle वगैरह होते हैं, वो those used to be a lot more sort of reliable, and now that is changing. अभी अगर वो निलंबूर region आप देखोगे, Palakkad, Malappuram districts of Kerala अगर आप देखोगे, you will see the rainfall has become a lot more sort of erratic. Summers are getting बहुत difficult, and it is getting longer. ठीक है, not only the Cholanaikkans but even the entire forest flora fauna are actually struggling. Streams वगैरह आप देखोगे, it is actually drying very early, and it is watering holes वगैरह कम है. Why is this? It is not because of nature alone. ठीक है, nature of course natural reasons वगैरह है climate change के लिए, but there are a lot of other things in and around. Just to mention a few ना, वो forest के around today you have a lot of these kind of plantations, right? Even the forest itself is monoculture plantations, teak trees, mahogany and so on. ठीक है, so diversity in the forest is very, very important, but we are losing that, right? Forest के surrounding there is a lot of agriculture that is taking place. वहाँ का pesticide, herbicide, insecticide is drifting into the forest, and that has an effect in the forest. ठीक है, lots of deforestation has taken place in and around that entire belt, and of course ये global climate change वगैरह सब मिला के आप देखोगे कि system disturb हो रहे हैं. Is this clear? But system तो disturb हो रहा है. And because of this, what are the kind of challenges they are facing, right? The tubers वगैरह जो है, which used to give them a lot of good food. I had shown you some early slides with some pictures as well. They're rotting underground, because there is certain kind of floods that is there. Yeah, the fruits that are there, it is basically not coming on time, right? Honeybees we are losing the honeybees. They are abandoning even their own hives. right? Now think, your entire food system basically depends on nature, on your forest, right? And forest and nature is becoming unpredictable. Kya hoga? Right? The systems are collapsing. That's the first sort of difficulty in there. From their Zen way of life, ये changes हो रहे हैं. Second thing is your forest का access का loss. ये actually a silent violence है. Right? Some scholars even basically call it as a structural violence against the tribes. Right? This is something that many people don't necessarily understand enough. पहले अगर आप देखोगे, forest was their home. ठीक है, home is basically their forest, and today though we have classified in such a manner that forest is basically government ka land, right? So if you're found in the forest, you're basically found in you're trespassing in government land. Okay, you're encroaching on government land, you are a criminal and you have to be dealt with as a criminal. You can imagine this, that such a huge sort of a change in just about 100 years, right? You're living in your own home, right? And suddenly you're called illegal, you're called criminal. थोड़ा अजीब लगता है, right? To be able to really understand and make them understand that this is the reality, right? They're not able to understand it, right? What changed? What changed in the last 100 years, right? Animal behavior has been changing, right? In fact, earlier अगर आप देखोगे, wild animals would not attack them as much. ठीक है, elephants were never known to attack humans. There was proper coexistence, right? Elephants do their thing, they eat and do whatever, and they see humans and they're like, okay, so just some other kind of people. But if you see here, today in the same region, you're having multiple deaths that are taking place. There are frequent attacks even from elephants. ये human-animal conflict suddenly क्यों आ रहा है? Why is it increasing so much suddenly, right? In fact, animals, especially these elephants, are learning something new. ठीक है? What are they learning? They're learning that humans are danger. ठीक है? The humans are actually danger. For example, if I can just write it here, right? Now they're learning that humans, why so? Because they're not just seeing, the humans from the forest, right? There was a real incident, ठीक है, इसी region का है, and in 2020 near Silent Valley in Palakkad, Kerala, right? There was a pregnant elephant, and वहाँ पे there was some food that was kept, and the pregnant elephant actually ate the pineapple. Inside the pineapple, what they had sort of laced inside were firecrackers. Like literally, like a bomb was planted inside those pineapples, so that I don't know what exactly was the thinking, right? You understand this, right? So the fruits, if they end up eating it, it would actually explode in her mouth or in her belly or whatever. It did explode, right? Her jaw was completely destroyed. Her mouth was actually broken. It was torn, and so on. She could not eat anything, right? She ran and walked, in pain, seething in pain, screaming in pain for days, right? And even in that particular period, she did not, the pregnant elephant did not harm a single person. And finally, she eventually found a river, and she went into the river and she stayed in that river for 4 days, just trying to get some relief. Okay, maybe, it is giving the trunk or water, the trunk and mouth in the water probably gives a little bit of relief or something. 4 days ke liye she did not come out, and eventually she died there. Okay, she did not attack anyone there. Even in pain, she did not. Socho zara. Okay, elephants remember. Elephant societies don't forget. So what happens, right? So the people who lived in coexistence, the humans and the elephants, now the humans are going to be seen as threat. Next time they see humans, right, they react, right? So tell me honestly, who changed? Who changed first? Was it the humans or was it the elephants? So you understand, right? So even this particular place, the forests have become a little more sort of dangerous to the Cholanaikkans, to the tribes, but not because of them, right? Again, because of outside influences, right? And even something, the most invisible sort of loss is going to be the knowledge ka loss. Knowledge ka loss is, as I just told you, right? So they are very, very knowledgeable. In fact, apparently they knew more than 100 plus edible plants in that particular forest and kahan pe milenge. Okay? So many different types of medicines, medicinal roots, medicinal leaves, right? Seasonal cycles, right? So many of these things were something that they knew in great amount of detail. Animal ka behavior kaise hota hai, right? Star-based time tracking, everything that they, and today if you see, in just a few generations, unka children basically, now unka food has changed from so many of those edible plants in the forest and so many edible tubers, right? Now the food is essentially what you get in PDS. Take a rice, some sugar, some packaged food like oil and so on, right? Simple rule hai ye, right? The more you use whatever kind of knowledge that you have, right, you keep it, and if you're losing it and if you're not using it, you actually lose that entire sort of knowledge. Ye hamara knowledge, ye hamara heritage hai. And when I say hamara, I'm basically saying it's our heritage, it's the people ka heritage, it's the forest ka knowledge. ठीक है, जब प्रैक्टिस बंद हो जाता है तब नॉलेज खत्म, राइट. सो वंस दे स्टॉप प्रैक्टिसिंग द फॉरेस्ट का नॉलेज, बिकॉज एंट्री ही नहीं है, राइट, इट डिसअपियर्स फॉरएवर, राइट, जस्ट अलॉन्ग विद मेनी ऑफ द फ्लोरा एंड फौना. ठीक है, नॉट जस्ट फूड, वी आर लूजिंग मेडिसिन. ठीक है, वी आर लूजिंग आवर इकोलॉजिकल सिस्टम्स, वी आर लूजिंग आवर क्लाइमेट का अंडरस्टैंडिंग, वी आर लूजिंग सो मेनी थिंग्स, एंड ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आर एक्चुअली इररिवर्सिबल. इररिवर्सिबल है, राइट. We say we are a lot more sort of developed and we have a responsibility to, make them, move out of the forest and bring some amount of development to them, right? And they on the other end are like, please let us be who we are, right? Agar hame chahiye to hum aayenge, but don't force us into these kind of places and this kind of a lifestyle. Now let's ask this particular question: are we, a lot more sort of developed than them, and are they underdeveloped, right? Or are we basically thinking, only one particular model of development is there, right? थोड़ा honestly सोचो, right? हमारे systems are also, if you see, of course, technologically बहुत advanced है. So from that particular perspective, we can say कि बहुत developed है. Literacy है, script है, writing है, बहुत सारे चीज़ें हैं that they don't have. ठीक है? But even in our systems, all our development has also resulted in a lot of problems. ठीक है? In fact, many of the laws अगर आप देखोगे, it is basically laws to fix the problems that were created by development. ठीक है, we said that we have built a lot of these kind of industries and ये है वो, but all those industries have also caused a lot of pollution, and now we are creating laws against pollution. बहुत सारे laws against pollution we have, right? So we say we have created development, right? But we have created a lot of pollution. We have created air, water, groundwater, बहुत सारा pollution. We said agriculture and and leather and मतलब बहुत सारे चीज़ें. But we have a lot of this chemicals, herbicides, insecticides, pesticides, right? And we are itself suffering from it. Right? We have to create certain kind of laws कि ये नहीं यूज़ कर सकते, वो नहीं यूज़ कर सकते. We are basically going back to organic farming, which is their ways of life. ठीक है, of course they are hunters and gatherers, but many tribes still do organic farming. Odisha में बहुत सारे, right? We say that we have so much. In fact, like the way I'm communicating with you is through social media, right? Through YouTube, right? We have so much development. I can reach you. But again, we are saying कि this is not good, and we are exploring different मतलब bans होने चाहिए, especially for children, right? Australia is basically thinking that we should have under 16 के लिए we should basically ban social media. So whatever we see as development, we are also seeing that as not so great things, right? And they are not in the not so great things, right? And they have their own kinds of ways of life, and they kind of want to maintain it, right? Even अगर wildlife का देखोगे, right? We feel that them being in the forest may not be appropriate, ठीक है? And then we feel that we have better idea of how to sort of like upkeep the forest, but they did it for thousands of years. And in fact, even our maintenance of the forest is something that we should be, थोड़ा सा question तो पूछना चाहिए, right? We say कि मतलब don't hunt, right? But we legally end up killing many animals when the population increases according to मतलब what we think is the right sort of balance. India में देखोगे vermin is something that you have wild boar, right? You have wild boar, you have nilgai, right? So ये तो होता है. Australia में अगर आप देखोगे thousands नहीं, millions of kangaroos are basically culled every single, मतलब 20 million sort of kangaroos have been culled, right? वो होता है. How many, like, do we really know? We don't know this, right? So when we think that we are doing the right sort of maintenance of the forest and maintenance of flora fauna in the right way, are we doing it right? Right? They've been doing it for thousands of years, right? So the question is this balance, ठीक है? Or is it हमारा development, is it essentially creating imbalances that we are trying to again fix, right? And अब tribes को देखो, right? Tribes को अगर आप देखोगे, they don't, मतलब वो imbalance create ही नहीं करते हैं. They don't over exploit, they don't create any kind of excess, they don't, मतलब even if they're hunting and gathering, ठीक है, they don't destabilize the ecosystems like we do. They don't need any kind of laws because they stay within the limits. तो बताओ, is their life underdeveloped in quotes, या is it एक अलग टाइप का a way of life, right? It's a अलग टाइप की एक intelligence है उनमें, ecological sort of intelligence है, right? These are important questions to be asked, right? And what are we actually losing? If you see this entire thing, right? So we are talking about Cholanaikkans, but this is not only about the Cholanaikkans. This is not about one tribe. I want to emphasize this, right? We are losing ecological knowledge not only of Cholanaikkans. We are losing ecological knowledge of many tribes. Okay, so many different ways of sustainable regional lifestyles. Everyone is sustainable in a different way, right? We are losing biodiversity का complete understanding, a different kind of understanding. And they are not just people, they are knowledge systems. एक बार ये गया, even after that, Google and AI and any other kind of technology is not going to be able to bring it back. So Google and all those things also help नहीं कर पाएगा. Is this kind of clear? उनका knowledge system, their ecological understanding, their sustainability, right? These are all basically things that we are wanting to have, right? And they are the living personifications, right? They embody these. In fact, if you see this particular population is just 191, right? Less than 200, right? They are just 200 in population. It's a very small community, right? Okay. So overall, to conclude, if I just tell you, right? If you can see this, pause for a second, think about this, right? We have actually, what have we understood, right? What have we seen? What can we learn? We've actually seen how the Cholanaikkans, a tribe from Kerala, right, with a very small population of 191, how do they live, right? How do they live a life that is deeply connected with their nature? How do they live in that ecological balance? And how do they live with proper limits without any kind of excess, right? We've seen that they have great knowledge of plants, they have great knowledge of animals, of seasons, of stars, something that even modern science is still trying to decode, is still trying to understand to a great extent. And what we've seen is that things are changing. Climate is changing. Climate is shifting. Forest is, uska forest ka loss ho raha hai. Animal behavior is changing. And how these changes are not just random, but, largely human driven, right? Or at least to some extent, they are clearly human driven. And finally, we've asked that difficult question. Is their life really underdeveloped as many of us understand, right? As many even policymakers actually think? Or is it a different kind of a life? Is it a different kind of intelligence? A kind of intelligence that maybe in today's time period, we have stopped valuing. So this is exactly what anthropology teaches us. Not to judge quickly, right? We're not here to say this is better, that is better, right? This way you should live this way, you should live this way, right? That's not the whole point. We don't want to judge. We want to understand what is happening. We want to understand deeply what is happening. Not to assume that one model is superior to the other, right? But to see how different ways of life actually exist and how they adapt, right? In different kind of environments. And think about this, their population is 191, the latest sort of census, right? More or less, right? 191. How many of the Cholanaikkans are going to remain, let's say, for the next generation, 20 years from today, 30 years from today? And how many of them will remain, but they will change so much that even their own sort of seniors, their ancestors would not be able to recognize them, right? Maybe recognize them as, you look like me, but your ways of life is so far alien to me that I'm not able to sort of identify you as one of our descendants. Culture change ho raha hai. So if you see this now, there's a huge cultural transformation that is taking place. Or shayad, this could be an irreversible loss. Okay, maybe not extinction of a group, maybe extinction of a particular culture. So I want to ask you something very genuinely. Should communities like Cholanaikkans, like this, be assimilated into modern society, right? Or should their ways of life that they want to live be protected? अगर आप Amazon में देखोगे, in Brazil, in many places, there are many pockets where anthropologists and outsiders have actually been to their places, but the Amazonians are making it clear. You can come, ठीक है, मतलब वीडियो ले रहे हो, कुछ कर रहे हो, कुछ YouTube वगैरह में डाल रहे हो, मुझे नहीं पता, ठीक है, but at least we want to be here, we want to live like this, and this is our area, ठीक है, they let them be. But Western Ghats का जो forest है और Indian forest जो है, we have slightly different ways of dealing with this, right? So most importantly, are we, how we think in terms of policy making, right? Are we the only mode of development, right? सच में आप सोच के देखो, ठीक है? Drop your thoughts in the comments, right? So let's have a real sort of discussion. Let's have some real sort of thinking. Because anthropology, it's not just a subject. It is actually a way of seeing world through different lenses, right? So this is a different way of looking at the world. Even if if this particular topic or if this particular lecture has made you really think, in a different angle, right? Then share it, okay? Because, these kind of stories basically need attention, right? It needs to be heard. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be spread to different people. So socho and tell me in the comments. And that's all from my side in today's session. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.